Hi, welcome back to my channel, beautiful minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I wanted to share some summer book recommendations with you. As you probably know, I have really been enjoying seasonal reading the past couple of seasons, and so summer will be no different. I love having books that really help me to savor the season, and I think that reading books that are set in summer or have a summery feel will just only help contribute to that. I realize that a lot of people like to read fluffy romance books for summertime because that's just kind of like a vibe, you know? I feel like we still have this mentality of summer break, even if we're still working throughout the summer. And so something light and fluffy really exhibits that. But I am not a romance girly, so unfortunately, none of the books I have to recommend to you are romances, but I do have some classics. I have some fantasy, I have some middle grade, and then I have a few other books as well. So let's go ahead and dive into the classics. The first book that just screams summer to me, I actually read in summertime, but it kicks off at the end of a school year and follows one boy's journey throughout summertime, and that is Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. The writing in this is so dreamy and just really exemplifies what it is to be a child in summertime. It is just so perfect, and there's not really a plot. It's just this boy during the summertime as he has interactions with different people in his town and different things that are going on, but the writing is just beautiful. The setting is amazing, and it feels like such a nostalgic call back to childhood. The next book is one you might not think of when you think of summertime reads, but that's The Outsiders by Essie Hinton. I still can't believe that she wrote this book when she was only 16 years old. Just crazy for me. It's so well written. It's a short little book about a boy named Pony Boy. What a great name, huh? Really nice parents. Anyways, he's kind of had some interactions with some rough kids in his town, and there's gang activity, and it's kind of really like a summer of him really growing up, but maybe not in the happiest way. But it's just so well done. And it does take place during the summertime. The next book that I want to recommend actually transcends seasons and has all 4 seasons in this book as it follows the course of this town throughout a year. And that is Under the Greenwood Tree by Thomas Hardy. So this does have parts that take place during the summertime and during warmer weather, which certainly fits summertime. But like I said, it has other seasons as well. But Hardy's writing is so pastoral, and this is a story of this boy and him falling in love and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, there's hijinks happening in the town with the church choir and a new like minister that's come in. And so there's some kind of like funny things happening behind the scenes. And Thomas Hardy is often known for his tragic, like, heartbreak stories, and this is not that at all. This is very lighthearted and very fun and also very short. The last classic that I want to recommend is the opposite of all of those things that I just said, and it's The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. This is not lighthearted, it's not fun, and it's not short, but it's so well written, and you've probably heard of this before, so you probably know it's the story of a family who's packing up and leaving Oklahoma and heading to California in hopes of better opportunities during the Dust Bowl. Their story is so heartbreaking as things go wrong time and time and time again, and yet they never lose hope. And I just think it's such a beautiful story of resilience while also being something that Steinbeck wrote to advocate for these workers who had terrible conditions and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really interestingly formatted as well, in that we alternate chapters about the family with chapters that are kind of observations on life in America at the time. So it has a unique feel to it, but it feels very hot. And I think that it's great for summer. Let's move on to some fantasy. First of all, I would be remiss if I did not recommend a book that I actually recently finished, and that's Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. So I love Robin Hobb. This is her second trilogy in her Realm of the Elderlings series, and it absolutely wowed me. But please do check trigger warnings, because this is quite gritty in comparison to the Farseer trilogy, so there's more content that you might want to be aware of going in, but it is essentially kind of like a pirate story. We're not only following pirates, but pirates are a huge part of the story, as are these seafaring trader families who have these ships that are able to gain sentience called live ships. And it's just like, it's so imaginative and so creative, and Hobbs' character work is just phenomenal. There's a lot of unlikable characters, far more unlikable characters than there are likable characters, honestly. But I've now read the first 2 books in this trilogy, and I'm getting ready to read the third, and it just feels like summertime's the perfect time to read a seafaring adventure. The next is a book that I actually read a couple of summers ago, and that is A Shadow in Summer by Daniel Abraham. This is the first in a quartet called the Long Price Quartet, which I feel like it's a really unique quartet as a whole, and I recommend all of them, but they each have different seasons in the name, so it's fitting that the first book takes place in the summertime. It's different from other fantasy novels that I've read in that, yes, there's deep character work, which a lot of other fantasy novels have, but it's a very slow-paced, slow-moving story. I'm trying to figure out how exactly to explain the plot. So it takes place in this town that is kind of like a merchant trader town. And so there's some politics happening, some things moving and shaking, but there are these people that are like poets who have the ability to write things to control these spirits, and the spirits have different abilities. And so we're following one particular poet in this story and some people surrounding him that he's training or other things, along with this particular spirit called Seedless. And I don't want to tell you too much more than that because I think it would be easy to give away certain aspects of the plot. But I feel like this series as a whole is very unique in that it's such a deep character study. And rarely do I tell someone that you need to read an entire series to get it. But this is like the only series that I could tell you that. I mean, if you hate book 1, you don't need to continue. But if you like book 1, I struggled with book 2 just a little bit. I didn't like it quite as much, but I'm really glad I stuck with it because book 3 was really good and book 4 was absolutely just incredible in the way that things were brought full circle in such a meaningful and deep way. It is just so unique, and like the customs and the world building is super cool. There's definitely an Asian influence there, but it's still just like utterly unique from other books that I've read. This is a fantasy section, and I feel like I need to include a Brandon Sanderson here. So the book that feels the most summery to me out of his books is probably Alloy of Loss. This is book 1 of Era 2 of the Mistborn series. So I obviously read Era 1 first, but I think you could read Alloy of Law. I know some people who have started with Era 2 and then gone back because they take place in the same world with the same magic system, but there's hundreds of years in between these 2 eras. Anyways, it's really interesting because it's kind of got a Wild West feel. There's some gunslinging things that happen, and when I was reading it, it felt to me like, man, this would make a really good movie. So I feel like because of its cinematic feel, it feels very summery to me. There's a lot of humor, a lot of action, and it's just a really fun time. The last fantasy that I'm going to recommend is a watery one, and it is also a fairy tale retelling, and that is Son of the Deep by K.B. Hoyle. This is a book that people don't talk about very often on BookTube because it's from an indie pub house, Owl's Nest Publishing, and so as a result, it doesn't get the same amount of publicity that, you know, someone does when they're writing for one of like the bigger publishing companies, and so that's really unfortunate because this book is excellent. This is a retelling of The Little Mermaid, but it's gender bent. So instead of a mermaid, we have a merman, and then the human is a princess. And it is just, oh, it's so well done. It's really beautifully crafted. The writing is incredible. And one of my favorite things about it was how much time we spend in the underwater kingdom. And as a result, like the world building that happens there and how descriptive it is, it's just very, very wonderful and really fun, and I absolutely loved it. It's the first in a series of fairy tale retellings that KB Hoyle has written. I think book 4 is actually coming out this year, but I just absolutely loved it. Okay, let's recommend some middle grade here because I feel like summer is a fun time to read middle grade because, again, if you're looking for something light and easy to get through, I feel like middle grade is really great for that. 3 of these 4 middle grades are actually classics. So Forgive me for that because it's just more classics, but one of them's not, and that one is Magnolia Wu Unfolds It All. This is a Newbery honor from this year, and it was my favorite of all of the Newbery nominees. It's a story of a young girl named Magnolia Wu, and she lives in New York City. Her parents own a laundromat, and she has long kept the lost socks that are left behind, because you know that happens all the time, right? You can never find the match for your sock. So they find matches all the time, and she created a board where she clips up these socks. There's a new girl that moves to the area, and she comes into the laundromat and convinces Magnolia to go on an adventure with her to find the owners of these socks. And so they're adventuring around New York City looking for the owners of these socks. And it's just such a beautiful story of community and friendship, but also it's really quirky and it's really funny. And it's just like everything that I want a contemporary middle grade to be. It does have like moments of emotion, but it's also not like overly emotional or super heavy. So I feel like that makes it a great summer read. And it does take place in the summertime. So there's that aspect as well. I just last month read Eight Cousins by Louisa May Alcott. And I feel like that is such a perfect summer read. This is a children's book, like I said, and it's written about a girl named Rose who is recently orphaned. Her father has recently passed away. So she moves to the anthill to live with all of her aunts and cousins. She has 7 boy cousins, so there are 8 of them altogether. She has only lived in all-girl boarding schools, so she is quite perplexed by the behavior of her boy cousins, and so not used to their rowdiness, being trained to be a prim and proper young lady. And her uncle ends up coming and being her legal guardian. And he notices that she's sickly, and his remedy is for her to run and jump and play just like all the boy cousins. And so you watch Rose blossom and bloom throughout the course of a year in this story. And it does start in the summer. It starts with their summer vacation. So a big chunk of the book is quite summery. But again, this goes through all seasons as well. Would this be a list of summer recommendations without Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson? I feel like this is the quintessential summer read. And yes, I think it is often considered a children's book. I see it classified sometimes as a children's book or sometimes just a classic. I think it was originally intended to be a children's book, though. I could be wrong about that. But this is, you know, everything that you would assume Treasure Island would be. It amazes me how Robert Louis Stevenson took all of these things, like, you know, a pirate with a peg leg, or Patch of Rosai, or a parrot on his shoulder, all these kinds of things, the treasure hunting and things that, and he made them in this book to be something that ended up influencing society so much that these are now our stereotypical views of pirates in like movies and stuff like that. And I just think that that's really cool. So this was like the source material for a lot of stuff that ended up becoming so commonplace in pop culture. So it's really fun to read for that reason. And even if you've never read it before, there's like an element of nostalgia there. And the last children's book that I'm going to recommend actually is a series, but the first book is The Saturdays by Elizabeth Enright, and this is part of the Melendi Quartet about these 4 children growing up and just their adventures. So the first book is about every Saturday they decide they're going to pool all of their allowance money, and one Saturday each month, someone gets all the allowance money and they get to do something that they wouldn't have had enough money to do otherwise. And so we really delve into the characters and personalities of each of these children, as well as their father and their housekeeper. There are furry friends that get added to the family along the way. And so there's just a lot of really precious things that happen in this story. I know book 3 actually does take place entirely in the summer, but I think each book has like elements that feel very summery and summertime vacation and all of those kinds of things. So I think that Elizabeth Enright has just like really, really beautiful writing for a middle grade book. And that's something I really appreciate about her, is I feel like anytime she's describing anything, it's just a strong sense of place and just makes you go, ah. Okay, I have a couple of other kind of miscellaneous books. I have 3 of them that don't fit into the previous selections. Some of them are literary fiction, one's mystery, one is literary slash historical. And that one I also just finished last month, which is Purple Hibiscus. And this is a heavier book, so go into that knowing that. Definitely check the trigger warnings because there is definitely some detailed description of child abuse in this book that is difficult at times, but it is a story of a teenage girl and her brother growing up in a oppressive household where there is abuse, and it's set in Nigeria, so it definitely feels swelteringly hot for most of this book. You feel like the oppression of the heat as well as the oppression of the household. The writing is absolutely beautiful. There's a lot of hope, but there's also kind of the nuance of an abusive situation where it's not bad all the time. So there are times where she feels loved and she feels like her dad's proud of her. And then there are moments of abuse and kind of the nuance and the mingling of love and abuse and fear all in the same space coexisting. And I felt like that was handled so well. But again, it's not without hope. But keep in mind that there are parts that are a little difficult to read, but it definitely has that summer feel. A very emotional book, one of my favorite books of the year already. You've heard me talk about it probably 80 million times already this year, but I don't care. It's perfect for summertime. It's Foster by Claire Keegan. This is a story of a young girl who is part of a family that really doesn't have a lot of resources available to them, and her mother is pregnant again, and so she goes to stay with a distant relative that she doesn't really know. At the beginning of the book, she doesn't know how long she's going to be staying there, but school has just recently gotten out. So it definitely has a summery feel, takes place in Ireland, and is really just such a beautiful story about how love changes people. The love for these people who are caring for this little girl changes her, but the love that they show her also changes them. And my gosh, I was just a puddle at the end of this little novella. It's like 80 pages long, and it is just sheer perfection. One of the best things I've ever read. And the last book is a mystery, and it is, of course, a Mary Stewart, which I also recently read. I actually read it during my spring reading vlog because it was recommended to me as a spring book. I don't regret reading it in spring because I think that it still suited spring really well. But it does take place in June, so it's actually a perfect summer book. This is the story of a young lady who grew up in this town, and she has since moved away, but her grandmother still lives there. Her grandmother ends up getting ill and has to move out of her home, so she asks her granddaughter if she could go back to Rose Cottage where she lived and can find some documents that she's in need of that she left there. So our main character ends up going back to Rose Cottage, and there's some mystery surrounding some things that are happening. It takes place in a really beautiful little small town. So there's beautiful like nature descriptions. You feel like the lushness of the flowers and things growing, but in the same respect, there's just a lot of quirky characters that really represent small town life really well. People who know everything about everyone and everybody. And if you've lived in a small town, you know exactly what that feels like. And it is just, it's so perfect. And the mystery is just really fun because there's some unsettling things that are happening and you don't know what's really happening, what's really not happening. Is this something supernatural? Is there a real explanation for this? We don't know, but it's just kind of unsettling, some of the things that are happening. So I really enjoyed this one, and I feel like summer is certainly a perfect time to read it. Well, those are some recommendations of some books that I think are well suited to summer reading. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. What are some books that you feel like are perfect for summertime? Maybe they're books that you reread in the summer because they have that great setting. Maybe they feel really hot, or maybe they're seafaring adventures, or maybe they just encapsulate the type of reading that you really enjoy having in the summer. But either way, I would love to hear from you what some of your favorite summer reads are. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me. And I will see you again next time.